Welcome back to the PreVetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, I am joined by Jonathan Myron. He's VP of Engineering at Healthie and an engineer leader with over 25 years of experience building teams across health tech, ad tech, mobile, and SaaS. He was one of the first 2 employees at ReachLocal, whose SimplePractice engineering team from 10 people to over 100 people, while the company scaled from 20 million to nearly 200 million in revenue, and holds a patent as a named inventor. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Federico. It's so nice to be with you.
It is truly a pleasure and an honor to be with you. So for people meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my career has been focused for quite a while on building engineering organizations that scale. It's, technology is a big part of what I do, but it's really a lot of this comes down to building great teams that work well together and lots of different sized companies along the way. Here at Healthie, we're a technology platform for healthcare. So we help companies build a lot of what they need to have a successful healthcare business, whether that's the smaller ones or the much larger ones. We support a lot of what they need for scheduling, charting, patient communications, all very securely. And so that's where I spend my time currently. But I really just enjoy that intersection of people and technology. It's been what's really kept me engaged all these years.
I think that the bridge between technology and people, it's fascinating, and it's something that it has a lot of layers of complexity that are usually invisible for people looking at the first time at an organization. They don't realize all the things that are that you need to set up in order to have a team that can be successful and building software, right?
Absolutely.
So you studied political science at UC Santa Barbara and then built a 25-year engineering career. How did, that career change happened?
Yeah, it's funny the way careers can go. I was looking for something when I took my education in political science that was specifically not engineering. I come from a family of engineers, and so technology was always very present in the household, especially in the early days of computers in the home. But I felt pretty confident I wanted to lean more heavily on the side of my interest that was like closer to history and government and writing and that type of thing. That's the type of stuff that was always really interesting to me. What I picked up along the way in college was, I learned how to keep honing my writing skills, research skills, learned a lot about the way people think. And I had the interesting opportunity when I came out of college of right about the time that the internet was really taking off. I discovered that early exposure to technology and the interest in technology never really goes away. So I found myself, in the early days of the internet, and I figured, okay, this is good, so help me pay off some student loans. It was a great time because, if you had a lot of motivation, if you were the kind of person that really enjoyed learning about other types of people and business systems and whatever it is, like there was a lot there. You could just sort of jump in. But, I figured I'll do this for a while, go back to grad school. Didn't know exactly what I did grad school in, but 1 year became 2 years, became 3 years. I think it was somewhere around 13 years after college. I realized I'm probably not going back, but I've loved every minute of the internet. It's been an amazing ride, and I've seen ups and downs, but that's how I got my start. But I think the college background helped a lot, just not in the way I expected it to.
Right. And something similar happened to me. I started industrial engineering because that was kind of so I did college at university, and the career that they had was industrial engineering. And I was like, my friends are doing that, so I want to do that. And even though I got the advice of follow software engineering, and I didn't. And then eventually I dropped out, and then I was hired at Microsoft when I was 16, and then, my whole career started on software engineer, right? But I still feel like I learn a lot and I appreciate a lot of things that I learn, but I still feel like maybe I should have followed a different path, right? Yeah.
You never know.
Right. But I I think that it's very interesting. I've met a lot of engineering leaders that come from a humanistic career, and they do the switch to software engineering. And I think that they have a unique perspective, as you have a unique perspective on the human aspect of software engineering, right? And I used to think that that as software engineers we're more focused on the computer, but and we have a hard time communicating with people, right? But then we do need that particular, skill set to be able to negotiate with software engineer, negotiate with the business side, and be able to align everybody towards success, right? And I think that that your particular skill set, becomes much more important, right?
Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit more about ReachLocal. You were the first employees, and how that led to holding a patent.
Yeah, it's, I think coming on early at a very early stage startup can be quite an education. This was like one of the best early experiences in my career. They were a very early stage company. There were the 4 original founders who started the company, and they got to that point where they said, "Hey, we're ready to start growing this thing." They were really sort of like so early that there was whatever angel funding was in the bank, which I remember the conversation. I was really interested after I had the initial interviews. I said, like, this seems like a great opportunity, and sort of almost like on my way out the door. I'm like, "Hey, thanks for the interview." And they said, "Oh, by the way, we've got this much money in the bank, and if we don't secure more funding, you'll be out of a job in 6 months. How does that sound?" And I said, like, okay, it's like sometimes you have those moments where you've just sort of found the right fit and the right founder. So took the opportunity, and needless to say, things like went really well over there. It's a real education coming on that early stage, because things are very clear. Like, what do you need to do? What do you need to accomplish? And the right combination of founders makes such a big difference. I can tell you honestly, like, they weren't always necessarily getting along beautifully. They weren't best friends, and they were the right people, though, to start this company together and to take this idea to execution. So, sure enough, the funding train, did fine. A few months in, there was the, additional funding, and then, things started to flow really well from a revenue perspective. I worked very closely with a coworker from the previous company I had been at. They hired the 2 of us together, and it's really funny because every now and then when we see each other, we still argue over which one of us was employee 1 and which was employee 2. So, I like to think the 2 of us, given we started on the same day and got hired at the same time, we both get the distinction. But, we had been working on this for, I'm trying to remember how long it was, but, somewhere in that first year, when I believe it was the COO came by with some paperwork from the legal team, and he said, "We're filing for a patent." And, what he wanted to verify my information, because he was listing us there as inventors on the patent. So that's how I became an inventor on the patent for ReachLocal. It was like this complicated mechanism for building an ad campaign on behalf of an advertiser.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's one of the reasons I like to intro and kind of go through your accolades, because an achievement, because, the more I know you, the more I realize you're a doer, like go-getter and doer. You build stuff, face problems, and I feel identified because I do the same thing. And then the thing is that I realize I've been building a lot of stuff. I've been doing a lot of things. I've been making a lot of mistakes as well, right, myself. And it's refreshing when somebody else go through the things that I've been accomplishing throughout the years, right? Because I forget, right?
Mm.
And because I'm focused on the next thing, I don't think about what I've done, right?
It's always
So
hard to talk about ourselves as well. It always
right,
seems like somebody else's accomplishment. So, but I think definitely learning accountability and ownership so early in my career is sort of a through line that has followed me all along the way at all sorts of different types of companies.
right, right. Yes, I think that the being able to develop the accountability, the ownership and follow up is a distinctive trait that allows you to, grow in your career and be able to build not only teams, but also software and, have a real impact on business, right? Which is, I think, is the ultimate goal for a software engineering team, right? I love the craftsmanship of building software, but I'm this year old until I realized that it's about the business outcome and how much we're impacting, right, the business.
Yeah, for sure.
You also managed a team in Mexico, right, at Que Pasa, and offshore teams at several other companies, right? What did you learn about making those dynamics and those teams work?
Yeah, I've had the good fortune to manage teams in many different continents. Latin America, India, Eastern Europe, other countries as other parts of the world as well. And there's a few different things. I think this is one of the areas where a lot of my interests and a lot of my educational background has actually been quite helpful, because it helps a great deal to understand the context of the places where people live. There's a reason why people might behave different in one place versus another. It's like, so I think that's extremely relevant. At the same time, people in other countries, they've got all like the same concerns. It's like, obviously they have a lot of the same concerns that everybody has, whether it's like they want to make a good living, they want to take care of their family, they want to be successful in what they do. So that's been like a really common theme for me. I think working with people in other countries was great for me, because early on I always had like a good sized chunk, either like the majority or like a large or a large minority of the team that I was working with remote. And I think that was tremendous, because I had to learn very early on, long before so many other people like really started to embrace, fully remote. I already had people working in different time zones and that type of thing. So, you learn very quickly about like the type of process that matters, the clarity that matters, how you communicate is just really the key to it. But the lessons that I picked up early in my career with outsourcing have been great, because it's really about finding great people, having a great partnership, whatever the arrangement is, whether they're fully outsourced or you're dealing with staff augmentation or whatever. Like, I've really valued the relationships of the people outside of the United States that I've worked with.
Right. I think it requires a little bit more of work on the cultural side, right? And aligning people, being able to help them communicate better, because it's coming from a different culture, those things need to be aligned between you and the team, but also between the team and the company, right? And the offshore teams I think that gives the managers a unique opportunity to kind of shape how that communication is going to be, because they can be an island, or they can be fully integrated, or they can be something in between, depending on how you see that it's going to be better for the team and for the company, right? Or for the project. And that unique characteristic requires a little bit more of effort on the manager side to not only shape that, but also, and it's a lot of things that I do coming from working with American companies for the last 20 years. I teach them this type of things of how to communicate, how to do proactive communication, how to document the tickets and everything, to make sure that the engineers can build trust with the managers, and they can be proactive, but also following the policies of the manager, right? It's a fine
Trust
line, right?
matters. Yeah, the trust matters a tremendous amount. Having clear processes that work
Right.
even when you're in different time zones are a really big deal. And I mean, it's not a responsibility to be taken lightly. I think this is where some people fail with it, where they say, oh, I found this great opportunity to work with an offshore team, and they're so talented and the prices are great, compared to American salaries, or whatever the motivation is. And people will get fouled up with this very quickly if they're not willing to invest the time into it. I've found, you need at some point, if you have a large continued continued presence overseas, if you can make the investment in either bringing some of those people to you or making trips to see them in person, that human connection makes all the difference, because when people realize there's a human being at the other end there and it's not just somebody trying to frustrate them, then it's much easier to get things done.
Right. Right. Yes, I completely agree. And once you build that trust, then what I've seen happen with when that trust has been built, I mean, before COVID, I would send the team to the States to work, on site and play mini golf with the product owners, with the managers, with everybody. And, we built such a huge rapport, right? And it was part of that, what you're talking about, that human connection, right? Because instead of being an avatar or an email address, now it's, that product owner that, she beat me at mini golf, right? And then, we pay the pizzas or whatever it was, right? It was that dynamic of teasing and playing and, having fun together, right?
I had the brilliant idea of bringing a bunch of engineers from Ukraine to a Dodger game here in LA, and
Wow.
baseball. They they were just like, "What is the point of this game?" They could not understand. They said, "This is so slow." Like they're like, "Hey, with all due respect, this is pretty boring." I was like, "You gotta, I realized, it's another one of those things you grow up with baseball." So they did like the peanuts though.
Nice.
Y-
Yeah. I mean, we used to go to Korean barbecue buffet, right? It was a great way to kind of connect together. Yeah. Until I learned a few people that, shifted towards vegetarianism, and we kind of have to find another place because there
That's
weren't
right.
enough, options for them there. Yeah. But it's true. I mean, it's the way that I try to describe it to the engineers is, I'm not trying to put down your culture. What I'm trying is to create a different culture that merges and takes the best of the American culture and the Latino culture, or whatever the team is, right? My experience mostly is Latin America, right? And let's build together a new culture. So when we are working together, then we're in an oasis, right? It's this specific culture that we follow, right? Like you go to an embassy, right? You're in another country, right?
That's right.
Try to take that idea, right? Because at least in Mexico, the time thing is a flexible concept, right? And and in the US, that's a big no-no, right? So those type of things, it's when we are doing a social event, it's okay to arrive late, but when we're doing a meeting with clients, we have to show up on o'clock, right? It's that
Yeah.
duality, right? Yeah, and then the other thing that I learned about is this idea of the power index. The cultural power index is how societies, or how group of people or cultures see hierarchies, right? I mean, my first experience at Microsoft was the ideas are more important than the hierarchy, right? So it was a very egalitarian structure, right? And Argentina is very egalitarian in that sense. So the power index is very similar to the States, right? I think it's 40 in the US, 44 Argentina, right? But in Mexico, it's 80, right? That means that they see the hierarchy more of a power structure, and are more afraid to speak up, right? So, and this is of course an overgeneralization, right? This,
Yeah.
doesn't apply to everybody, but I had to work hard to kind of explicitly invite people to be able to speak up, do these blind feedback loops, so people will feel more comfortable to tell how they felt, right? And bubble up those ideas, right?
Yeah, at some point you're dealing with cultural norms that, you can't change overnight, and you have to figure out ways to work within the system that you have, because you can't just, have people wake up to something completely outside of their comfort zone.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. I completely agree. Yeah. And you also at Simple Practice, you also took the team from 10 people to over 100 people, right? How does that affect the culture, and how can you, manage the culture of the team, right? What breaks when that team grows so
Yeah,
fast?
things change dramatically very, very quickly in those situations. Yeah, this was an interesting one too, because the when I joined at Simple Practice, it was almost the entire tech team was overseas. They were in Eastern Europe at that point, and then the plan was, hey, we've got a lot to do over here. We need to scale. there was a tremendous amount of brain power and knowledge in the offshore team that I didn't want to lose. So to me, it was never, there was never like a conversation about, oh, we're going to get rid of this, but how do we augment it and how do we grow it together? There was a culture there of like really strong technology excellence. The team was very rigorous. Code was built in a way that, things were strongly tested, strongly reviewed, and it was part of the engineering culture that I felt worked very well, and it really did scale extremely well, was that it was like, we're not going to ship crap. We're going to only ship things to production that are of the highest quality, even if that means taking longer. So bringing in new engineers into the culture was like, that had to be part of the anchor, that we're writing the highest quality code. That mixed with the absolute importance to the customer experience is how that was the blend there. So as we continued to grow the team, those were the types of engineers I looked for. It wasn't about, hey, how quickly can you build code? It was how much do you care about the quality of what you produce? What are your aspirations for as you grow as an engineer? And then, are you aligned with our mission as a company? And what started with me and, the CTO and just a couple others in those early days, as the team grew, and this is something that's always been very important to me as you grow a team, that the team has to be involved with helping to hire the next people. It has to be, first of all, low ego enough that somebody can come in and identify somebody that is maybe better than they were when they started and feel good about that, because they say, this is an organization that I've grown in, and I want to bring other people that fit this mold. So that was a big part of it. That was like, it's like when you talk about those cultural norms and things, that was the new culture that mattered for everybody. And so we continued to scale in the Eastern European office. We continued to scale there. That team grew from the initial 10 to, as part of that 100+ team, that was about 30 people that were overseas there. And then the other 70 in the United States were hired all over the United States. But that was the common value. It was part of the conversations I would have with people. It was part of the tech interviews. It was like A to Z, this is what we were looking for. And that was the culture we were really dedicated to maintaining.
Right. Yeah, I think that's amazing, because when you have 10 people, you can still have a Zoom call or whatever with everybody, and you can still remember everybody's names, everybody's stories, right? But then with 100 people, I mean, I felt that you would get, lost with the detail of everybody, right? It gets harder and harder to track, right?
It does. I definitely got to a point where somewhere along that journey to 100, I think it was maybe somewhere between like 35 and 45 people, I suddenly realized, I said, I can't keep track of all of this by myself. I remember talking to a leadership consultant. I remember our first meeting, we had, I think it was like 10 meetings together. And he's like, I looked at your org chart, and he's like, yeah, we need to talk about like your next level of leadership. So that was, we kept things pretty flat for a while, but that was the next challenge that goes that level deeper after hiring engineers, is how do you bring on leaders, either grow leaders within the organization that are already showing a lot of that acumen, or hire people that will carry that torch. So that, I think, communication overall process is some of the stuff that breaks down pretty early on, and you have to get ahead of that.
Right. Yes, I think it's you need to do that in order to be able to provide to those 100 people a better follow-up on their upskill, their career path, the productivity, right? Because I had situations where I had middle management and I kind of lose visibility of what was going on, right? And the report was not as accurate, and by the time I realized that there was a productivity issue or with a person, we had to let that person go. And I felt that we failed it, right? Because we could have done so much more. We could have, provided more structure and guidance, right? Because with the correct guidance, then you give them the opportunity. If then the outcome's still the same, that they're not performing, at least I would feel better that we gave them the opportunities and the correct feedback, right?
Yeah, it's
And
very
the
easy
opportunity to correct.
or it's relatively easy, I should say, in a flat organization to have this
Right.
very sort of democratic mindset, and we're all in this together. And I sensed it coming. You get to that point where you start to do those first promotions, like this person's promoted to senior or staff, or like somebody's a lead or a manager and that type of thing. So the standards matter. After not long, where you have to really start to think about, like, okay, what do these roles mean? And for me, it meant really taking a step back and saying, well, what are my expectations? And like, to your point, when you talked about that feeling like you failed somebody, have you been clear with the expectations? Do people really know what it means to succeed? So a lot of that type of, a lot of that effort of really going the extra mile and thinking about, how you document and how you create your organization and where it is today, and also where you're taking this. It's like, okay, I continue to grow. I continue to hire 2-3 people a month. What is this organization going to look like in 6 months and 18 months and that type of thing? So you really have to have a mind towards that as well.
Yeah, it's a unique challenge. I think that what I've done on my side is I set up structured performance evaluations every year, but also that created these expectations of every year I get a salary bump, basically just like a birthday. It's I'm a year older than I deserve a raise, right? So I had to work that out, or rephrase or reframe the idea of the performance evaluation not as a automatic promotion, but rather let's discuss what new responsibilities have you taken, and let's discuss how can we help you achieve them, or get be able to own those new responsibilities, right? Because the a lot of the reports that I would have is, I've been trying to improve my English. I've been trying to, and it's great, but it's not enough. We need to build proof that the responsibility is being owned rather than tried, right?
Yeah, it's a sort of like I was alluding to, and the understanding the expectations and that regular feedback loop is such a big deal. Nobody should really be surprised if they get bad feedback, and honestly, they shouldn't be surprised if they get good feedback. That's also a red flag. If you tell them, "Hey, you're doing such a good job," and they say, "Really?" Like, that shouldn't be a surprise. That should be part of the feedback loop. But yeah, but a lot of this just really comes down to building that mechanism very early. One of my favorite interview questions that I've been asking people for a while is, if you come here to this company, if we bring you on tomorrow, how do we help you? And it's usually people are a bit taken aback by it. They say, "Wow, I've never been asked that question." But it's not, it's not the usual, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's hopefully give me a little bit of a glimpse into where you're succeeding and where you feel challenged, and how do I enable that as I help you grow? Because at the end of the day, it's like, as if I can help successfully prepare people for whatever it is that's next for them, then they're probably going to be an even better team member now.
Right, right. And keeping the people motivated with a focused goal, that becomes a game changer, right? Yeah. And the other thing that when I hire, things that I look for is how hungry they are to prove themselves within the organization, right? Because if they have that hunger, then I can provide them, as you said, how can we help them is, I can provide, resources. I can coach them. I can mentor them. I can give them resources, courses, whatever it is, and they're going to devour it, and they're going to implement it, right, within the organization, because they have that hunger to grow, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I've seen it so many times, and I try to be transparent with people. It's like, if you've been doing this for a while, you've probably had some failures of your own you can share with people, and I could put that information out there as well. It's like, here's what happened to me in this situation. Don't, and it's like, use this information as you will, but it's like that's only fair, I think.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, when I share, stories of personal failure, the first reaction is that they're surprised, because they're saying, well, but you have so much experience. You have done everything perfect to be where you are right now. And I'm like, no, I mean, the reason I achieved so much is because I made so many mistakes and I was able to learn from those, and then I can avoid them, right? That's experience, right?
Yeah, that's what we gain. Yeah.
One day, I can share this story. It's very interesting. One day I shut down a Coca-Cola server, production server, but by mistake, right? I mean, I had to install a DLL in the Microsoft web server, the ISS, I think it was, or I don't remember the name, but anyway. But nobody told me it was my staging server. Nobody told me it was another project's production server, right? So it's just, install DLL, you have to restart. Sure, let's go. And then, oops.
Yeah, we all have those moments. We had such a rigorous development and deployment process at SimplePractice, for example, that if somebody could successfully break production and like bring the thing down, we would give them an award.
Right.
Part of the message was, hey, like, we're in this together. Like, maybe there was a failure somewhere else along the way. Somebody didn't catch your mistake or didn't review at the level of rigor that we wanted. But we also wanted people to feel like, they should be thinking about doing the best job possible. But we don't want people so risk averse that they do nothing,
Right. Right. And that's why I was talking about this concept of being proactive, but also aligned with policies, because when I being an individual contributor, I don't know the full context. So sometimes that makes sense to me with the information that I have. Maybe it doesn't make sense, knowing the full context. So, understanding, being able to negotiate or understand with the manager in charge of the team, what are the edges? How far can I go without, breaking policy, right? Or, if I was talking with a product owner that was suggesting, hey, your team, you guys should do whatever differently, right? I cannot speak in representation of the whole engineering team, right? If it's not my place, right? I mean, I have to verify that with the manager, right? Because otherwise I am breaking policy, right? And there is proactive and there is being too much proactive, right?
There's a balance there, no doubt about it.
Right. But then once you figure that out, once you figure those edges, then you have more freedom improving within those limits, right? And I think that's, at least to me as part of the team, gives me a lot of confidence to go and do better, right? Yeah, I have an interesting story about that, because I grew up in the city, right? And with my parents, we would go out for camping, right? And then, coming out from a small apartment to the middle of nowhere, you kind of have no boundaries anymore, right? Your boundaries are so far off, right? But what would happen is that me and my brother would kind of get glued together to my parents because we were afraid, because now there were no limits, right? And that was overwhelming to us, right?
Yeah, it's such a stark difference, especially if you've grown up in an apartment.
Right. So I think that having that clarity of the boundaries, how far can I go and improve and explore and change, that gives the team more confidence that they can go and do stuff, right? Yeah,
I completely agree. And you're right. There's, you want people to sort of push on that a little bit, because that's how an organization grows as well. When people say, well, why does it have to be this way? And it triggers those important conversations.
Right. And I think that's the same spirit with what you're saying on, whoever destroys production gets a reward, right? It's about, it's not about the breaking, it's about the experience that we get by breaking it, right?
Yes. Yeah. And hopefully we all learn something from it so we don't do it again.
Right. Yeah. And when you're in a small startup, as you were talking about, it's, at SimplePractice, then you own everything, right? And then when you build a team, you can kind of delegate, break up the responsibilities. Yeah. I enjoy working at startups, but then eventually when I move up to work at enterprise, I appreciated that I didn't have access to production, right? Because it's like,
I've definitely pointed several companies along the way where I've literally gone to people and said, please take my access away. Like, I don't need Ability, like now that you're here, great. You know,
right? Yes, and is this thing that we're talking about, responsibilities, right? Because it sounds great at first, but then the responsibility is a way that we're off, right? It does add to, all the things in your mind when you're working on stuff, right? So I think that's a great, it's great to do it and experience it, and then being able to let it go because you appreciate the hard work that takes to keep production running, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and deployment and hot deploys and regression test. It is a level of complexity that it's hard. Yeah,
Absolutely. And, I've always had tremendous respect for QA teams. That's because the people that love that pursuit of like, their job is to try and break something. And it in many ways can be a very thankless sort of job because when things go well, nobody has anything to say. They say like, "Oh, we did such a good job." When something goes wrong, they say, "Why didn't QA catch this?" So it's a certain breed of people that really enjoy that pursuit.
right, right. I used to feel the same way that it was a thankless job. Yeah, I agree with you that production it becomes a thankless job because if it works, nobody complains, right? But then something happens, and then everybody's putting the finger on who made the mistake, right? So it's a high stake, low appreciation work. Yeah,
Yeah, certainly.
it's a it's like the spy movie sounds great, but then when you learn about real spies, they they have a very a mundane lifestyle, right? Nothing compared to the movies, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I used to think the same thing about managing teams, that is a thankless job because, nothing happens until something happens. And then, there is a finger saying, what happened, right? Yeah. But I came to change that because I started feeling the appreciation of the people that I manage when they grow, when they move up the ladder, when they get a new job, when they are able to move out of their. I had people that I hired that were living with the parents. They were able to move out. They were able to buy a
Yeah.
house, a house or a car, or get married, right? And that's where I feel the appreciation the most, right?
It's one of the areas I've spent a lot of time with new managers, trying to help them sort of see their success in the success of others, because it's that first move from acting as an individual contributor to being a manager is like that's really where the success comes from. Is your job to be a force multiplier, that you can get these people together and that they're going to make the team successful, and that direct recognition is not there anymore, but you see it in the work of others, and it does require a certain mental shift. I'll never forget. You never know the impact you're having on people. Sometimes you do, I guess. People can be very clear. They say, "Wow, you did this thing for me," but sometimes you'll get a call from somebody years later. I remember I had one conversation where somebody said they never forgot the last thing I said to them when they left the job, and it changed their life. And for the life, I didn't have the courage to ask them what it was. I have no idea what it was, but they said like that changed my life. But I remember I had one experience of somebody called me from the airport, and he was leaving LA, he was going to another city, and he was taking a job he had never thought he was going to have. And he contacted me while he was waiting for the plane to board, and he was like, "You changed my life." And like those are those moments that you hold on to because that's so motivating.
Yes, I completely agree. I used to think that it was our our um our contributions, but I learned to realize, and probably it was more of my ego, right? But I realized, well, I help. It's their accomplishments, and I was a coach, and I help them, become what they become, right? So I used to own a little bit more the accolades that they would do until, I realized it was more of an ego, trip from my
We
side.
get to
Yeah.
own the challenges as well and the rough moments.
Right. Right. Yes. Yes. And I I love my sensei. He says, we're not teaching; we are just transmitting the knowledge. Right.
Hmm.
And I'm here I'm paraphrasing, right? But it's the same idea, right? And then it's up to the practitioner to take that knowledge and then do something with it, right? So yeah, I become humble and humbler throughout the years, right?
No doubt
Yeah.
about it. I'm with you.
It's so you also accomplish a low attrition and a high eNPS, across these 100 people engineering team, right? That is very rare to achieve. How did you actually were able to achieve that?
A lot of where I think I can add the most value to companies, tech teams is really like taking the long view of where, like I mentioned, where that team is going and the culture we want to build and the skills and everything we want to build there. So I think you find people early on. I think the interviewing early matters and the types of people that you want. So I think having a sense of what your mission is on that does make a big difference. I've definitely invested a lot of time, over the years constantly refining the hiring process at different places, and it's different for every company. That's like, I think it's a big mistake that people can make going into a company and saying like, I know the right way to do this for sure, because every company has their own mission and they have their own culture, and you want to steer that maybe in a direction, but you can't come in and just like, and just come out with something completely different. I take a long view of where I want my teams to get to, and it's like, you could put like a bunch of superstars together and they're not going to be amazing on day one. It's a multi-year project. So I try to make sure that the people that I hire, the people that are working under me, that they understand like where it is things are trying to go and they understand how they fit into that. I can be as transparent as possible, and let people know where they stand and just really build a great engineering culture for them to be a part of. And that's if I think if that's demonstrable to people, if they can sense it and experience it, then they don't have a strong motivation to leave.
Right. Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that being able to understand what people would need and want, and then from there being able to provide the environment where they can feel it's not protected. The word is, encouraged to take risks, but also protected a little bit on the, you get all the heat from from business side, and you cannot transmit all that to the team, right? You have to, transmit in a way that the team would understand what is important, right?
Yeah. Well, and we were
And
talking
then
about back earlier. I think it's like if somebody's, if they're doing well, they should know it, like we said, and if they're not, like it's that's that opportunity to grow. And even, even the people that are struggling, it's not, it doesn't help anybody if they don't understand that and they don't understand where they might be able to improve. And sometimes people, they have a job in mind that they think they're perfect for, and it's, you have to have the presence of mind and be able to observe what they're doing and say like, that's actually not where your skills lie. You would be great for this, and so I think having those types of conversations with people goes a long way. And like I said, for these like healthcare companies especially, but this really applies to every company. It's people need to understand what the company mission is and how their unique contributions are to it, because that goes a very long way for the success of an engineer in a team.
right, right, yeah, having the support and guidance from you can make a big difference. And the other thing that I notice is the idea of appreciation. If they feel appreciated, if you can transmit the appreciation that they've made through their achievements, the risks that they took, and everything, then they're more willing to stay within the team, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's I mean, I, at the end of the day, it's about the human aspect, right? It's about feeling appreciated, feeling a belonging, feeling that they're doing an impact on something larger than themselves. And then, of course, the money is one of the factors, but it's not the only factor. I believe it's not the only factor, right? And then being able to be challenged, right, to do better, right?
A lot of engineering is it's a creative pursuit. And so it's like,
Right.
I think understanding that for people, I think for me, from my own sort of, looking back at the early question from education into getting into software, it's you have this great opportunity to see the results of what you do and to like, and you can steer an entire company that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then being able to align everybody towards building something that is, I mean, we're talking about the numbers on revenue, and that's how we measure companies, growth, and that's fine. But that is also an imperfect reflection on the growth on the people and everything that you did with the 100 people team to get them, aligned towards building something that it's, amazing, unique, and is actually having an impact on the business, right? Yeah, because I've been on the other side where I would be like super focused on the craftsmanship. This has to be perfect. Yes, but if I build something that is beautiful but it doesn't help the business, then I am not aligned with the business, right? And it took me a while to realize that, right?
Yeah, we have a responsibility for the, like a company's time. They're there to make money, and that's how people feed their families if they work there. And if we're not aligned on that, then everybody's time is wasted.
Yes, I agree. So you moved from outsourced to in-house engineering at more than one company. What has to be true for that transition to succeed?
I think part of it is you have to be in a situation where it's a growing company. I think it's a long-term investment. If you look at sort of like what we've been talking about in terms of like the long-term building of a culture and a very capable team, it's a company needs to be in a growth position. They need to have a good outlook. They need to be sort of taking on new business and new customers, and I think that's a really big part of it. There are the aspects of having good process and having a good hierarchy in place, and sort of knowing what it is that team's going to be doing. That I think those are sort of the key things. It's like that seems to be what is true with this transition time and time again, is really like what that bar is for excellence.
How are you using AI in your engineering work today?
Yeah.
And I can tell you my thesis, but I want to, let you speak first.
Yeah, the answer, like the way I see it right now, is that it needs to be part of everything. It's the planning of the work you do, the writing of code, reviewing of code, deploying of code, like how you're testing your code. I think it's people are adopting it in different ways, but I think the common denominator is that the zeal for experimentation needs to be there. So I think it's a tool, but I think that what we're seeing is like the limitation is not on individual hours anymore, because people can accelerate quite a bit, but it's the engineer's creativity is still manifested in this. So I think it's really like it has to be part of the team. It has to be part of the entire company's mindset. This is really not just an engineering thing at this point. Engineers certainly have the ways we use it, but I think the success of it comes down to, well, did you try that? Did you try that? It's like, I think it's it can be very repetitive, but I think, you talk to an engineer and say like, how's this project going? They say, well, I'm stuck. And it's like, did you try it with Claude? Like, and sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I did, and this is the result I got. But a lot of times it's like, no, I hadn't thought of that. And it's like, that's the approach. I think it's like I said, engineering is a creative pursuit for a lot of people. And I think this is just like a massive accelerant for that. So yeah, it shows up everywhere. But at the end of the day, like the bottom line, I think for the success of the code that people are writing, the quality of it, it's still all comes back to that individual ownership and accountability again. I've moved a lot of the hiring process from thinking, I want to see what you can do, but don't use AI in this, to saying like, I want candidates using AI as part of the interview. I want to actually see them do it. But I also want to be able to say like, that's amazing what you just threw together in the last 30 seconds. Explain to me what this is doing. It's like the of the art and the craftsmanship of great engineering still matters a great deal. But it's like, I think this train has left the station. We have to be using this absolutely as much as possible. And that's the mindset.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, I think that overt use of AI during interviews, I think is fine. My issue, or where I push back, or where I draw the line, is covert use of AI. If because that is deceiving, or is lying.
Yeah.
That's what I don't accept it. But I think that as using it as part of the interview, and asking the whys, and how would you use it, and understanding what is going on becomes much more important than the actual code that is written, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's really, it's like the amount that a single engineer can accomplish has been so dramatically increased, and so there's this just tremendous opportunity for everybody to be, yes, productive, but it's also like we can do a lot of good with this. But
Yes.
my opinion is, like, this is why I was talking about the interview process, for example. It's like, it starts early. We want to make sure we have people that are embracing this. And I would much rather just sort of drag this into the light and say, like, show me how you use this, and how you can accomplish your job. And let's have a great pairing session together with this.
Right. I think that labor arbitrage is it's a good thing in outsourcing. Gives you a little bit of leverage as a company. AI arbitrage is, kind of leveraging the models to improve productivity. I think those are fine, but I think that the most important lever is having a long tenure team that can actually guide the agents, because they have a deep understanding of the business model, right? What are the rules, exceptions, the use cases, and being able to guide and provide the feedback, and understand when the agents are going out of, don't, because the agents can give this, wrong answers so confidently that you need somebody can say, wait, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Let's fix it.
Well, and
Right.
I think it's, this is where you see a lot of like that. There's always been that last mile of development. Like, you can get a tremendous amount of work done, maybe in a very short period of time. And that's accelerated. And I think we're spending more of the time now at the last like 5%. And saying, okay, like, how exactly do we refine this to get to the point? That's where the human touch still matters a great deal. And we've just sort of shifted a lot of it further down the line. But, it's like the level of accomplishment, I think, is there. It's just manifesting in a different way. So, it's like, I don't think you can replace experience with that. It's just like so many other times in history where technology has given us a opportunity to accelerate. This is doing that too. It's just in a very brand new sort of way.
Yes, it's a unique tool for automation, but yeah, rather than thinking it's super smart, which there's some, it has a lot of cleverness into it, but at the end of the day, it's a really, really complex automation tool, right? That we can leverage.
Absolutely. I think the big, like, really big impact is that a lot of those barriers to starting work have come down. It's a lot of the conversation. What should we do? Should we try it this way? There's a lot less risk now in saying, well, why don't we just try it? And maybe I can have a prototype later today and we can put this in front of people and get their opinion. So that's like, I think one of the best opportunities in this, because it's really like production level code. Like we said, like, still requires, that touch of experienced and qualified engineers, but it's a lot of the pre-work has changed dramatically. And we can use this as another sort of architect in the room to help accelerate. So I think that's really where we're, seeing a lot of opportunity there. And I imagine we'll continue to see this grow, in the coming months and years.
Yes, I completely agree. Another layer to this is that I believe that who should be accountable for the work of the agent is whoever manage those agents, right? We cannot, give accountability to agents, right?
No, it's absolutely. I figure, people have a lot of different tools they bring to the job, but it's their work at the end of the.
Yes, yes. And that's where it becomes much more important, the hiring, the managing of the people, and having seasoned engineers on the team, because now they have much more productivity in their hands and much more responsibility towards generating more impact on the business, right? And I think that's a game changer. Rather than replacing engineers, is augmenting engineers, allowing them to do more impact on the business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've definitely seen it with a lot of the products, I use from other vendors. It's suddenly that backlog of things, you've been asking for. They're like, "Oh, we released this feature," and the next week another feature. And I say, "Okay, like it sounds like they discovered AI."
Right. Jonathan, we're running out of time. I truly appreciate you being here today. Any final advice for, engineers that are thinking on taking a leadership role or thinking on managing a cross-border engineering team? Any advice to them?
I think it's a lot of what we talked about. I think that, finding success in the work of others is a really big deal. I think, it's if you're developing leaders, this is what you care about. And I think if you're working with people across borders, it's like, remember that they're human beings, remember that they've got the same motivations as everybody else, and be very clear about your expectations from the outset.
Amazing. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Federico, it's been a pleasure. It's been so nice to meet you and chat with you. So thanks again.